This is a transformational moment in time for B2B marketing. Well, search in general and visits to your website have been so massively important in the early stages of the B2B buyer's journey. And now it's still happening. They're still looking for information. They're just not coming to you to get it. Your buyers don't trust the information on your website to begin with. If you think that they do, you're wrong. They absolutely don't. I look at it in consumer terms, which is I've bought 3 cars over the past 5 years, and I haven't gone to the dealership to do the deals in any of those instances. I've done it all online, and I've done all of it virtually, even including having the car delivered to me without ever having to go to the lot. I'm not the only person doing that, and I can absolutely guarantee you that busy marketers at your targets also don't want to talk to a salesperson, don't want to look at your website information. They want unbiased information, quote unquote, right? When you look at analytics for companies where you're seeing, search impressions going up significantly, going up 50, 60%. That means that, there's just more search volume, more people are searching, you're going to get more search traffic. But the conundrum was you're actually seeing CTR go down significantly from like 2% to like 0.2%. And then you start to think, well, wait a second, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? These are two things that shouldn't be able to exist in the same universe. But the reality is, this paradox is that people are staying on Google.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the OnBase Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Moody, and today I'm very excited to be joined with Vincent DeCastro again. This is our second one of these episodes together, but we're talking about disrupting the B2B buyer's journey with AI and zero-click search. Vincent, thanks for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Chris, thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure to get to chat with you. So excited to jump into this material. I think it's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, me too. I've read the research. It's awesome. So that's the first thing. I'm really excited to dive into any new research that guides cool insights and things I should put into slides and be talking about more. Before we jump into it, can you tell everyone a little bit about your journey and what led you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the agency has been around since 2009, and we actually started as what I would term a traditional digital marketing agency, primarily focused on search, so paid search and also SEO. So we have a tremendous amount of experience and expertise. We've obviously been in and exclusively focused on the ABM space for almost 8 years now, but there's just been this really interesting evolution. And these two passions of mine are now convergent at this very, very pivotal moment in really B2B marketing. But I think it goes beyond that. It's pretty profound because it really has massive effect across just business growth in general, especially at the enterprise level. So I know I sent you that article that comparing and contrasting NVIDIA and Intel. I think it's a real serious cautionary tale for executives at enterprise organizations that, you don't want to be Intel, you don't want to be Kodak. You don't want to overlook these opportunities in time where you have the choice to go this way instead of that way. So that's what I've been deeply involved in over the past 3 months and really excited to start to talk about this topic with you.
Yeah, I love that too. And it is such a cautionary tale. I mean, incredible companies still, but then you look at NVIDIA and I believe it's close to 3 out of 4 people working there are millionaires now because the stock has done so well, which is an incredible example of when you get this right, which leads me to a question before we dive into all the research. What has pushed you, as you've focused on ABM exclusively with your agency for 8 years, what has pushed you to be on the forefront of the rapid technological change and AI? Because I know that every single time we book time to record, it's a struggle for us to hit the record button because we're catching up on the newest tools and what we should be trying. So we have to fight ourselves to stop talking and hit record and record these episodes. What's been the driver to put you in that seat versus just trying to be attached to every single account and their success from where they are today?
Yeah, it's a struggle. Like you, I just have natural curiosity. And so when ChatGPT first really started to become popular or people began to use it, I immediately started to think about what are the implications in terms of like workflows or what I would call now agentic AI, where these tools are actually capable of doing full, complete tasks for you. And so, I'm just really interested in how can AI essentially optimize us as humans. I think that's the best way to put it. Like, how can I do more and do better with the help and the aid of these tools that are now at our disposal? And I just think it's an incredible point in time in our evolution as humans, right? I mean, I think, we've never really had the opportunity in the past to just take giant leaps forward in terms of productivity. It's probably a decidedly American perspective, I think, but I think there are implications in terms of really improving work life balance too. I think there's huge opportunity there as well as we go through this evolutionary state with AI, and it's going to happen at such a rapid. I mean, it already is rapid, but as AI uses AI to create better AI, it's going to be breakneck speed, man. I mean, hard to keep up already. I don't even know what it's going to look like in a year.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I told you before you hit record, I got in a fight with one of the AI tools last night. It was giving me the wrong answer, and I didn't like that answer, and I couldn't reroute it out of that path. I know those things can happen. On the other hand, I've been trying to teach my soon to be 14-year-old how AI could assist everything that he's doing. And he runs a YouTube channel now and does stop motion and builds cardboard weapons. And I was like, hey, you could
Wow.
just ask, give me 10 ideas for stop motion with an action figure that I can put in a variety of poses that would do well on YouTube. And he was like, what? And I did it, and it gave him step by step instructions for
Whoa.
10 different videos. And he finally looked at it after a week because dad doesn't know anything. And then last night he said, man, these are actually really cool. This is really nice. So to your point, I mean, I think sometimes we try to solve the biggest problem or the smallest problem, but there are ways to use AI for everything in between. And that's something I'm trying to remind myself every single day. And I know one of the things that more people should be paying attention to is how AI is changing search. And the first entry point to that, we should talk about zero click search, make sure everyone understands it, and then your pitch on why this is so important in B2B.
Yeah. I think it's happened rapidly, which is really pretty amazing from my perspective. I started with search way back when Google really came on the scene and started to increase in terms of usage and then figured out how to monetize traffic. And it was a very, very slow, methodical disruption to user behavior as print use started to go down, search engine use started to go up. It was, I mean, literally the course of like 5 years before you really got to that place where it's like, okay, wow, now print's gone, yellow pages are gone, and a lot of trade publications are gone and now replaced by Google. This change is even more disruptive, and it's happened in really the course of like 6 months. Now, Google set the stage a while ago. ChatGPT came on the scene and really forced Google to accelerate it. But once they incorporated the AI answer component into their search results page and made it prominent, and when I say prominent, I mean in many instances right under the paid section above the traditional organic section, that was a game changer. And so what my first kind of brush with that was, you know, odd anomalies when you look at analytics for companies where you're seeing, you know, search impression going up significantly, going up 50, 60%. That means that, there's just more search volume, more people are searching, you're going to get more search traffic. But the conundrum was you're actually seeing CTR go down significantly from like 2% to like 0.2%. And search traffic obviously following the same or similar trend. And then you start to think, well, wait a second, what's going on? Right? Like, why is this happening? These are two things that shouldn't be able to exist in the same universe. But the reality is, this paradox is that people are staying on Google. They're getting their answers now without ever going to a website. And implications for B2B marketers or B2B websites in general is that now they're getting this synthesized information about your industry, your brand, your competitors without ever having to visit a website at all. And they're getting it all right there on Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude.
So many places I could take it from there. I mean I think the one that's coming to mind most for me, I came up through content. That was my big break in marketing. So really focusing on content. If we could get a room together, kind of content marketers anonymous, if you will, it's a safe space, and we have every person who runs content strategy and B2B in a room, and we're really trying to make sure they understand these implications and what to do about it. What are you going to be telling them? Because look, for eternity, I wanted to say years, but it's it's a lot of years. We've tried to get people to search for us. We've tried to get people to fill out a form. The world is changing yet again. I know sometimes we run around hair on fire and overreact to everything, but this is a huge one. If folks are searching for us and that traffic is not going down, which I know you're going to cover, we've hit on that in your report, but they're not clicking. What do we do as content strategists?
Yeah, that's a big question. And the short answer is, from my perspective, is to break down the silos inside of organizations. I think that's the very first thing that organizations need to start to look to do, because in many organizations that we work with, enterprise is our primary focus, and we see very siloed brand, content, lead gen, demand gen, ABM. And the reality now is that, you have to be cognizant of making sure your content, all of your content, is consumable or able to be consumed by the LLMs in the way that you want them to consume it. And so when you think about, content marketing now takes center stage in a big way, but it also needs to be supported by brand and lead and demand and absolutely ABM, because the way these LLMs are consuming this information, there's a lot that can be interpreted, and they do. They take a lot of liberty, quite frankly, in interpreting your brand, your industry, the players in it, your authority. And then below that is the nuance. Like, what are your value propositions and who are they directed towards and how do they get interpreted, or worse, misinterpreted by the LLMs? And so the smart organizations that we're working with right now are really taking this much more holistic perspective on content. And it has to be this way. Otherwise, you run the risk of kind of what you talked about, an LLM fighting you and not giving you the right information, although it's wrong. Like, it's wrong and you try to report it as wrong, but that's a much longer challenge to try and solve than to do it right to begin with.
Yeah, I'm curious about controlling that narrative and trying to make sure the right information is there, and then not, I love saying marketers ruin everything. That's one of my favorite adages. So I'm not saying this is the new keyword stuffing. For those who don't know, those of us who came up through HTML and CSS, one of the tricks to get your site to show up on search was, when you built the web page, you'd put in every keyword known to man in the source code, and then that would help pull up your web page. And then the search engines are like, hey, that's pretty dumb. Why are we pulling that? We should control it. So I'm thinking both from the brand governance and guidance perspective, and then also from the marketing side, where we want to shape the narrative and change perception and make sure that it's accurate. I can say personally, I have done some cool things with our enterprise instance of Gemini and ChatGPT, but that is contained to our enterprise. So even my brain wonders, well, cool, I've built out these great content kits. Your podcast episode we did before is in one of the content kits. So if anyone's searching for certain news on account base or what should I be sending to folks, I've built the packages for them, but that's in our instance. So what do we need to do
Yeah.
across all the AI tools to make sure that we're controlling our narrative and doing the best we can as marketers?
Yeah. No, you're 100% in the right headspace, because the conundrum is that ultimately you've got very personalized experiences for many enterprise organizations. So and even personal accounts, right? So ChatGPT knows who you are, your preferences, what you like, what you dislike, what you care about. Probably, I think lots of people post about this, probably knows you better than you know yourself in some instances. And so when you ask for results, it's going to give you what you want to hear. Is that the same as what the rest of the world is seeing? Probably not. So you have to think about it in those terms, that it's a coin with two sides, which is to say that you as the user are going to see what you want to see. But on the other side of that coin, how do I influence that? Because your search experience now is highly personalized, almost exclusive to you. And so controlling, one of the stats that's mind boggling to me is that traditional search queries are generally going to be 4 to 5 words. If you look in your search console, your Google search console, you'll be able to confirm that yourself. This new approach to searching or understanding information, average prompts are 20 to 30 words. So massive difference between how people use search engines. But the underlying theme is, how do I control that? How do I influence that? How do I track that? Like, that much information, that's mind-boggling mind-bogglingly complex to be able to track that information and to really impact. So you have to have a plan. You've got to have a good, solid top-down plan for what's my main theme? What are the related topics to that? How does that play into my ICP, the personas? And so the convergence point for me is ABM already has that information, right? So when you run a good full funnel ABM campaign, all of this stuff is already in your content analysis. It's already part of the roadmap. It's already how you're trying to influence people. Now the secret is, how do I turn that into content that is accessible to the LLMs and that they consume?
Yeah, I think it's the fun part, but it's also the tricky part because we have to get it right. I mean, we know that it's something we need to be on the front end of, and then ultimately, I will eventually get to a place where I rant about the importance of creativity. But before we can get to that, we need to be in front of people and be in the consideration set. So, do you have any start here day one approaches to that? If someone's listening and they know what AI is, they know the importance of AI, they know Chat GPT, Perplexity, Gemini, some of the others, but they're going, man, I know how to do great content, but I don't know how to start to better educate LLMs. Do you have a start here tip?
Yeah. So the first thing, and I always start with this, and even going back to SEO days, it's always about a technical audit of your website. Is it set up for LLMs to even crawl and index your information, even before you get into the whole hierarchy and semantic piece of, how these tools are going to aggregate information? Is your site really set up technically for these LLMs to come and get the information and to repeat that process? Because spiders don't only come once or even once a day. They're coming to your site probably every day, multiple times a day, sometimes even, 10, 15, 20 days. So your log files, and this is where I'm going to get into a little bit of technical information, your log files are going to be your best friend in the beginning and really all through the process, to understand, when is ChatGPT crawling my site? When is Perplexity? When is Claude? What are they crawling? Are there barriers? So there's a tool out there, free tool, pro tip for anyone out there trying to figure this stuff out: Screaming Frog. Download. They have a software to be able to analyze log files, but then also to analyze the technical makeup of your website. Tool that I've used for a very, very long time. Great stuff to use to really give you those initial insights. Like, are there barriers to these crawlers from getting the information I want them to have, even before I start to structure how this content is set up on my site.
Yeah, it's always funny to me. I mean, it's not funny, it's frustrating, but it is funny. Everything is so circular and cyclical in marketing because we went from obsessing over our website to spending so much time to spending 10 times the effort on what should we be doing on LinkedIn and other social platforms, and now it's like, oh man, we the technical setup of our website may determine if we hit pipeline or not for the next year or 2 years or 3 years. So that's always amusing to me, just how everything becomes new again. And,
Yep.
I'd love to frame that with a question that's directed more towards the marketing leaders. So if there are marketing leaders listening, which we know there are, not necessarily the practitioners, what are the biggest challenges they should be aware of with zero click search and how AI is changing go to market strategies?
Yeah, that's where I've really been spending a lot of my time and energy over just the past like 6 weeks, is trying to understand the bigger implications, not just, simple like traffic to my site is down, that's affecting my lead volume and obviously pipeline and revenue, and of course the attribution concern. But you know how is this going to shake up the full buyer's journey, and how are your buyers now looking for information, trying to make their buying decisions? And that's, at the end of the day, that's why we're all here, right? Like 100% of us are in the business of helping to be able to, for lack of a better term, help to guide that buyer's journey. That's what we do as marketers. And so now a big giant chunk, the first two stages, that awareness and then that kind of problem solving stage of the buyer's journey, have been blown up. Like almost all of that early stage stuff in that buyer's journey is related to either search or coming to your website for content, white papers, downloads, etc. That's gone, because the real underlying thing, and this is where it goes back to that trust piece, is that your buyers don't trust the information on your website to begin with. If you think that they do, you're wrong. They absolutely don't. I mean, I look at it in consumer terms, which is, I've bought 3 cars over the past 5 years, and I haven't gone to the dealership to do the deals in any of those instances. I've done it all online, and I've done all of it virtually, even including having the car delivered to me without ever having to go to the lot. I'm not the only person doing that, and I can absolutely guarantee you that busy marketers at your targets also don't want to talk to a salesperson, don't want to look at your website information. They want unbiased information, quote unquote, right? The reality is that none of this stuff is unbiased. These LLMs are still getting our website content, but what they want is comparisons done for them. They want to know what other organizations have had challenge wise that ladders up to what they're dealing with. And then what are the solutions, and who are the people that, or the organizations that can help me? And so where you've had control before, you knew they were coming to your site to a decent degree, right? And as you saw more people from the buying committee get involved, that's your signal to say, hey, this, account is in market. Well, what do you do now when that's gone? That's the, and I'm not a big alarmist. Look, I've seen every major Google update come and go over the past 20 years, and some of them have been massively disruptive, and some of them, like a little blip on the radar. But I never got like, oh my gosh, the whole industry is gone or changing. Well, this is that moment. And I'm not being dramatic, and this is not hyperbole. This is a transformational moment in time for B2B marketing, because zero click search, well, search in general and visits to your website have been so massively important in the early stages of the B2B buyer's journey. And now it's still happening. They're still looking for information. They're just not coming to you to get it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I almost think it changes how we think about intent data. Where many would have the argument, Intent data is not that valuable. And the case we would always make, I think you and I both, is you're using it wrong if you think it's not valuable. It should help
Yep.
inform what you do, who you pull in, who you target, how you multi-thread, all the things. Now I think intent's going to be a stronger indicator because there aren't as many superficial reasons to be on your website for the more sophisticated personas because they're going to get all their answers in AI. So it changes how we think about that. I'm curious though, the value props. We all of us spend so much time trying to perfect how we message to our buyers. And knowing that you and I have both had plenty of incorrect answers or LLMs pulling older information. I was doing research on a company one time. It had the completely wrong CMO who joined a competitive company. And then I
Yep.
said, hey, that person actually doesn't work here. They work there. You're exactly right. Let me
I
update
love
that.
that answer. You're
Thank you.
exactly right. I'm
I
wrong.
just it reminds me of the used car lot, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, this car is perfect. They just took it out of a flood and vacuumed it. Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. So I'm curious, how do we take our best messaging, our best value props that are accurate? We know there's bias. You hit on that. But how do we start to influence zero click search with our value propositions?
Yeah, and that's a brilliant question, and I think it's super appropriate and where most people should be thinking about this process at the moment. And ultimately, it's going to come down to you've got to open the kimono, for lack of a better description. That content that you've kept, behind a gate or in a PDF or some other form, you really need to be able to have that facing the public. It's got to be set up to be consumed by LLMs, and it's got to be structured based on what it is you want your brand to be about, what you want it to be known for, your value propositions. How does it layer into not just your ICP, but the personas in your ICP and what they care about? So we know that the CIO and the CTO and the CFO and the CEO are all going to have different concerns about that decision making process. And even further down, like for different size purchases. But thinking about when I think about ABM, what are the most important and impactful applications? It's always those large deals, very long sales cycles, top level executives involved. How can you structure your data and your content on your site to be able to answer their questions when they might be doing research, if they're involved in the research, or if someone else is involved in that research, but they're thinking like the CEO or the CMO or the CTO? That's really where I feel like this convergence of content marketing with demand gen, ABM, brand really need to come together as a team to think through that process and to make sure that that information is easily accessible, easy for these LLMs to parse and start to aggregate. And even then, look, we've all had instances of the information just got is wrong from ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude because they're operating sometimes on older information, which another really important point. So I've been reading some really incredible detailed data on Perplexity. I'll share the name of the guy who's been generating the reports and the data, but it's incredible how much the freshness of your content matters to LLMs, even more so than it ever did to Google. So that evergreen content that performs so well in the search engines, you need to be updating it and iterating on it, and then building content off of that into more specific pieces of content related to that same topic. That's like, in my opinion, 101 for LLM, optimization.
Yeah. Well, I'd love so many things. I mean, your
It's a
comment,
lot,
I
man.
was just writing it down while you were talking. I put the quote, I'm not an alarmist, but dot, dot, dot. So if you saw me look to my left, that's what I was typing in my notes because I want to pull that one. But it is making me think, what are the things we should be doing differently? And sometimes you even hit on this too. Everyone wants a similar situation use case, right? Like you use different wording, but my brain routed it as, okay, specificity wins, which was the topo mantra, and everybody
Yep.
wants to know someone like me who solved a problem like mine, and that helps to build trust. So I'd love to hear, what is your favorite example or success story of a business that has gotten this right so far and that they're catering to the AI trends and how they go to market?
Yeah, they're definitely not in the B2B space. I've seen a lot of B2C companies that are actually at the forefront of what I would consider to be cutting edge optimization efforts geared towards LLMs. I can't remember there was a major retailer I was just reading about recently. I can't remember it, Kendra Scott. So they've been deep in the weeds in doing content analysis and audits, understanding the information that's being surfaced through log file analysis, and understanding what these LLMs are looking for. Um, how they're sourcing the content, and then more importantly, how are they talking about their brand? And that's, I think, the biggest challenge right now for anyone is going to be, how can I really continue to report on this, to know in a big scope, which is, I think, almost impossible. Probably someone will solve it, but all of the different ways that people are searching awareness, consideration, validation, evaluation for my topic, for what I care about. That's going to be a massive, massive undertaking. So, you take it one bite at a time. And you really want to be able to know what all four of these, well, five, because traditional SEO isn't dead yet. You'll still see organic traffic coming to your site. It just not nearly as big as it or impactful as it had been before. So you've got these five entities that you've got to continue to track to know, how are they mentioning my brand? How am I ranking against my competitors? Is the information accurate and true? And then what's my response if it isn't? How do I fix that? That's a big undertaking. And so that's why I say it is not a individual siloed team within an organization. It's a giant, massive overhaul to the whole process. And how do organizations look at marketing, which now, quite honestly, plays a much bigger part in the whole revenue process? Because if and I will say, let me start with this part as a real piece that is true right now. These large brands are really the ones that are benefiting from this change, because they have so much authority. They are very well known, and they're on every single list of top whatever that's out there. So they're really experiencing the benefit of that brand awareness. What the nuance there is going to be, if you take no enterprise is only focused on just the one thing that they're great at and super well known for. Every big enterprise that we work with has 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 other business units underneath that aren't as well known, that they aren't you know, the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, or even on most people's radar. We work with a very, very large cellular provider in the B2B space. Everyone knows who they are when it comes to their primary core competency, but the other stuff that they do, people don't know. And so that's going to be their challenge, is how do I now try and get mentions in these conversations when people are looking? So you want to make sure you maintain your dominance in your what you're well known for, but then how do you also make up ground against the incumbents when you're talking about industries that you're not the leader in? And that's going to be a huge challenge.
Yeah. Well, there's one more question I want to hit on, and I typically have a lightning round at the end. You and I have done this before. So for anyone who wants to know Vincent's favorite people that inspire him or good reads, search Vincent DeCastro on base. You can get the other episode for that, because there's one question I want to spend the rest of our time with, and then we'll hit on how folks can get in touch with you after. And the question is, if we fast forward a couple of years, what does zero click search and AI driven search look like? And how do we best future proof our strategies for that?
Yeah. This is I think it's real difficult to predict, and here's why. When I look at the trajectory of AI, first of all, 2 years ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted ChatGPT. very unlikely. And the other piece too related to that is Google's been in AI for a long time. I think like a decade. So this isn't brand new to Google at all. Where everything goes from here is going to be hard to say. The predictions that I've seen from Gartner, for instance, by 2028, 50% of organic traffic is going to be gone. Does it happen sooner than that? Probably. I think it's very likely to be a lot sooner than that. But these LLMs are going to figure out how to monetize. Like that's the other piece, right? If you think back to Google, Google had massive users well before they started selling clicks on their search engine. And so their process of figuring out how to monetize that was pretty long, right? They had to buy another company that they had technology to be able to use that internally to start that auction environment. And that's where, the invention of paid search came from. Something like that's going to happen in this space without a doubt. And so, when you think about the comparison of traditional search versus LLM optimization, the missing piece of that puzzle is tracking. So you have Google Webmaster Tools for people like me in the SEO industry to see, all of the keywords that you show up for, what's the volume associated, where does your average rank, and your inbound link profile, their technical issues, all that stuff. You don't have that insight into ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude at the moment. That's probably going to change. You'll see tools that are going to come out by these AI engines to give you more insight, but then they're going to figure out how to monetize it. And we've already seen, I don't know if you've seen this, OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever you want to call it, has partnered with Shopify to be able to provide in result links to make purchases, just like Google Shopping. And so I think that's the writing on the wall, is at least from ChatGPT's perspective, how are they going to make money? It's going to be similar to paid search, right? You're gonna pay, and the Shopify arrangement, I believe, is a percentage of the proceeds of the purchase. So OpenAI gets a percentage of whatever the person spends on that purchase. So I think you're going to see stuff like that happen. That's going to accelerate, I think, the usage of LLMs. It's going to, at some point in time, it's going to erode significantly, I think, the use of Google. You're going to see more parity. How do you future-proof for that? I think, the goal should be collapsing the silos in your organization marketing-wise. I think it all has to function together for you to have the best opportunity to be in the right place at the right time, no matter what the changes are, because there will be massive changes. And heck, there might even be a new player that comes on the scene that we couldn't have even predicted. Like that's ChatGPT's story. Making sure that your site is technically set up for LLMs to get the information that you want them to have. But the other piece is knowing what has been historically published. So what we're calling that is kind of that shadow brand. And you mentioned it a little while ago, maybe earlier in our conversation. All of this old historical information that's still on the web that these LLMs are getting and crawling and sourcing. And that could absolutely be counterproductive to what your brand is now. So really cleaning up your footprint is, doing that audit, understanding the hierarchy of how your content should be laid out based on your ICP, the personas, their buying journeys that you're familiar with, and then knowing what's out there on your brand and cleaning that up, I think, are the absolute most important things you could be doing. Where this goes from here is, man, it's scary, but also exciting, because it is truly, I think, pivotal in our lifetime. I don't think we're going to see anything this foundationally altering ever again. I mean, not in our lifetime anyway. It's truly a unique moment in time, I think.
Awesome. Well, for anyone who feels like hiding under their desk, that is not the best thing to do. So I think these are great
No.
tips. We'll be sure to link to the research that you've done on this. So that's an awesome resource for everyone. And if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can go to our site, abmagency.com. super easy to remember that one. You can email me directly at Vincent, Vincent at abmagency.com. Always happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me on LinkedIn, connect, direct message, etc. So yeah, always down to chat about this stuff. And Chris, always a pleasure to connect with you.
Yes, likewise. It's good to see you again. Thanks for dropping all the knowledge and helping everyone, and we will talk to you soon.